Hey everybody, back here again. If you can, just as a mic check, if you can hear us, just let us know in the chat window.
Check, check,
Uh,
test, test.
all right, sounds good. And Josh, and Nako, and Justin, Ricky. Okay, cool. We're great. So we have a special guest here, Daniel Keys from EOS Nation. They're doing a lot of great things, and they've been involved in this referendum system, or setting up this referendum process and system for quite a while now. But it's finally getting close, right? So he's going to kind of share us what's going on and give us an update. So really appreciate it. I'm going to let you go, Daniel. You could introduce yourself a little bit more, and let us know what you guys are up to these days, and then and I'll leave the floor to you. So
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having participated in the last EOS Ignite to share our early progress in the referendum system, and I'm really happy to be back to share you our more mature progress on the referendum system. So thanks again for the intro. I'm Daniel Keys. I'm with EOS Nation. I've been project managing the development of the EOS referendum system. It's been a little over 4 months now, I think, since we started working on it. And we're getting really close to the point where we're ready to start doing some real referendums. So I'm really excited to share the progress. June did an awesome job in the introduction, kind of explaining why the referendum system is important. So I'll just expand on that just a little more before I get into the nitty-gritty details on the referendum system. So you should be able to see my presentation here. The EOS is a community governed blockchain. So it launched back in June only after 15% of all of the tokens from EOS token holders staked towards block producers to elect 21 block producers. But that's just one piece of what makes it a governed blockchain. As EOS evolves over time, we're going to need to make code and core protocol upgrades. There's a worker proposal fund that's collecting EOS every day. Last I checked, there was almost 20 million EOS that has collected in there, which currently, the intention is for that to be a fund controlled by EOS token holders, but there's currently no mechanism in place to allow token holders to decide how to spend that money. And we've also got, as June touched on in the beginning in the intro, EOS has a constitution. And right within that constitution, there's an article that explains the rules for amending that constitution. This constitution and its subordinate documents should not be amended except by a vote of the token holders with no less than 15% vote participation among tokens and no fewer than 10% more yes than no votes sustained for 30 continuous days within a 120-day period. So while we have rules right within our constitution that explains the process that we need to follow to make changes, when EOS launched, it actually did not include a mechanism for doing any of this. So that's why we've spent the last little while. It has been a collaborative effort with a number of various block producers to build this system. And like I said, I'm really excited that we're getting really close to having it ready for the community to start shaping the future of EOS. So in a nutshell, here's kind of what the referendum system is made up of. It enables EOS token holders to vote on proposals with their staked tokens. So just like when you're voting for a BP, the weight of your vote is determined by how much EOS you have staked. It's made up of a EOS.io.forum smart contract that was been created by the team at EOS Candada. We have a EOS votes tally, which was primarily created by Denny Carrier, who's our CTO at EOS Nation. We have a voting portal, which is kind of the user interface that makes it easy for token holders to interact with the smart contract. And that was primarily done by EOS Tribe, Generios, and EOS Nation. Steve Floyd did the design, and Generios and EOS Nation did a lot of the coding with the help of Steve, formerly of EOS Tribe. And another important part of this referendum system is that we're supporting alternative UIs. So it was very important to us that we wanted as many people to be able to participate in the governance process as possible. We didn't want to have to force people to go to a portal that maybe they're not necessarily comfortable with. We want them to be able to service themselves in the wallet or the user interface they're already comfortable using. So we'll get into more details on that as we go. So this is what eosvotes.io looks like. So this is our voting portal. And like I said, it's really just a simple user interface that makes it easy for token holders to interact with the smart contract that EOS Canada has deployed. What the smart contract allows you to do, and Josh is going to go into this in more detail a little later, just simply allows you to submit a question, a proposal, and allows anybody to vote on that with a yes or a no or a really technically a 0, 1, 2, 3. But we need a tally to count those votes and a user interface to make it easy to interact with that. So this is what EOS Votes looks like. This is what it looks like if you were to expand one of the proposals that were submitted. Another thing I'll mention about EOS Votes is it's designed as an educational portal as well as a place where you can go and vote on proposals. So we have all kinds of information on there that kind of goes through, what is a referendum, why is it important, how does it work? So it's a good starting point for people who are new to referendums. So you can see here, again, an expanded proposal. This is something that was submitted as a test by Josh Kauffman from EOS Canada. You can see basically the details of the referendum here. You can see who submitted it. There's a vote button. You can see some stats, like at the bottom here, when this proposal will expire, how many people have voted, the number of EOS that has been staked towards it, and the percentages of yeses and the percentages of no votes. If I click that vote button, this is what I'll see. So this is, once I've logged in with Scatter, I can either vote yes or no, or if I have voted previously, I can hit that unvote button to remove my vote. This does, by the way, use up a very little bit of RAM. I think Josh will probably get in more details on that on the forum. So if I need to reclaim my RAM, I can hit that unvote button and I'll get the RAM back that I used when I voted. So the EOS votes tally. So again, I talked about all the information here is being pulled from the contract. The stats, though, the expiry date, the number of votes, number of EOS staked, all those percentages are actually not being calculated in the smart contract. They're being calculated off-chain on the tally system that was built by Denis Carrière. So this is the way that it works. Basically, we're pulling. So there's the system that Denis created that's reading the data from the EOS blockchain. We're using Diffuse, which is a great tool that the team from EOS Canada built that makes it a lot easier for us to basically manage the data. We're able to extract only the data that matters to us for the sake of this referendum, and it makes it much easier for us to handle. Within Node.js, Denis has done some voodoo to kind of put the logic together to tally up the voting. And then it displays all that information in an Amazon S3 bucket for the various UIs. They can pull that information to very easily display it to the users. So this is what that data looks like on the back end. It might be a bit of an eye chart, but in a nutshell, basically what we're doing here is we have to break it down by we're counting the number of people who have voted at the top. We're counting the number of EOS staked by each user and this account section here. We're counting the number of EOS staked by each proxy, and then we're doing we're doing some kind of layering and to come up with our final result, which is the final staked amount. So we do support proxies. It was a little complex, with BP voting. If you have a proxy set and then you vote for a BP, because it's a system contract, your proxy is automatically removed. This referendum system, you are able to vote on a proposal, but also have a proxy set at the same time. We need to make sure that we're not double counting. And I think we came to a great solution here where we enable the users to basically trump their proxy's vote. So if a proxy votes for a proposal and you have your EOS staked towards that proxy's vote will count using your stake, but you can vote yourself on that proposal and it will count your choice, not your proxy's choice. So this is an example of an alternative UI. So if you go to blocks.io, it's using pulling that data from the blockchain and pulling the stats from the tally tool to display results here. So this is just an example of another way you can display the data and that users can interact with it. And this is a what it looks like an EOS authority. They've done some really cool things with kind of going above and beyond with how what they're doing with the data. So this is again, this is what it looks like as a proposal, but you can get more details here, like vote history, and so this is all things that just by pulling that data from that tally tool that we saw on that previous slide, EOS Authority has built this user interface to make it much easier to read for the average user. So this is something that anybody else who wants to build within their own wallet or build their own UI, this is a great example of the type of thing you can do. So last I checked, there were already 12 different UIs and wallets that have committed to or are already supporting the EOS referendum system. So for example, if you're already using Graymass, I know a lot of EOS token holders are, you'll be able to participate in referendum right within the wallet. You won't have to go to any alternative UI. You don't have to expose your private key to additional risk if you don't want to. And you're probably all asking, when Rex? So if Rex is, as you probably have heard of, is a proposal by Dan Larimer to enhance EOS. It would require making some significant changes to the way that funds are allocated, which means it needs approval from token holders. The great thing is, so EOS Canada has recently submitted their smart contract for the referendum system to the block producers. Last I checked, which was maybe half an hour ago, we've already had 10 of the top 30 block producers approve it. Once it's approved by 15 out of the top 21 block producers, it will be deployed into EOSIO.forum smart contract. It'll take a little bit of time for all the UIs to update to this new contract, but basically at that point, we'll be ready to start accepting real referendum proposals. But really, it's going to be up to the community. So the referendum group itself has no intention of submitting any proposals, but there are a number of groups out there kind of in parallel already working. We've got a Ballotcraft group who's been working on creating best practices on how to craft the proper proposal. We've got EOS Alliance who've been very diligent in actually coming up with the language for particular constitutions that they want to put up for referendum. So there's all these different groups all over the EOS ecosystem who are already collaborating in their own ways to shape the future of EOS. And once this tool is live, we'll be really see that all get unlocked. So join us in evolving EOS. If you go to eosvotes.io, again, there's a lot of great educational content there. If you go into the little hamburger menu at the top, there's actually also a link to our Telegram channel. So if you have any feedback, any questions, we're all in there, happy to help and chat further. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them if there's time.
Daniel, there is a question in the Ask a Question section. Maybe I'll just read it. It's once the proposal or vote expires, I assume RAM will be returned automatically?
That's right. That's right. There's, I believe it's set for 3 days after expiry. And Josh will likely be able to go into confirm this better than I can. It's part of the smart contract. But I believe after 3 days from the expiry, the RAM will be returned to all of the users as well as the proposer. And as I mentioned earlier, voters could retract their vote at any time and have the RAM returned to them that way. Thanks. And I see Josh has confirmed, correct, 3 days. Thank you, Josh. How do we filter out the best questions? That's a good question. So we've, on the kind of protocol level, we decided there's not going to be any filtering. So there's no, again, going back to the rules of how to amend the Constitution, it's very vague in terms of you need 15% of token holders, you need 10% more yes than no's, but there's nothing in there around limiting access to ballots, and we didn't want to impose any rules that we didn't have the authority to do. So the way we're handling it is kind of decentralized, free market approach. We've left it completely open to the various user interfaces to decide how to control the filtering. So any UI can decide, let's filter all proposals in order of the most popular. Let's only show proposals by these trusted accounts. Let's show proposals by everyone. Let's So over time, I suspect what will happen is best practices will emerge, and the community will probably come to a kind of a method of filtering that everyone kind of likes, just through kind of that free market competition of may the best UI win.
So there's another question from Justin Buck below. Is there anything the referendum team is going to publish, potentially with some backing from top EPs, that publicizes production-ready voting forms?
Yeah, actually, I was just we're in touch with the Alliance, so they're going to be helping us put together a communication and soliciting the kind of support of the BPs. So that we can kind of, I guess, put together a list of the UIs that we've kind of deemed that are working correctly. And like I said, in the meantime, they are already reviewing the smart contract. Once we get their approval, we can already assume the smart contract has been vetted by the top 21 BPs and is good to go. Anything else?
So any other questions? Otherwise, we can just no, really appreciate it. Let me get back on the screen here real quick. Sure. But yeah, really. Oh, there is one question. Maybe you can answer that. How long
do we got to wait? It's going to depend. So like I said, basically at the time, once we get the 15 out of the top 21 BPs to approve, last I checked, it was 10 of the top 30. So not all of those are top 21, but most of them are top 21. But once we get the 15 to approve, basically the smart contract is deployed. From what I understand, it's probably just a matter of days that it would require the user interfaces to get updated to use that new smart contract. Thank you. Eve has posted a link in the chat if you want to have a look at the status of the approvals. And again, like I said, it could be a matter of days before we have something that's ready to do some real referendum.
Great. No, thanks so much, Daniel. Yeah, awesome job with everything you've been doing with this referendum and all the other people that are involved in it. It's really exciting. I didn't realize it was going to be that soon. So we'll be out there waiting. It'll probably be out there before we're ready to vote, I guess. But it's that's a good thing. So
that's right.
All right, really appreciate it, Daniel. I'll see you out there in the EOS universe and Telegram and all that. So
take care. Thanks again for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Hey guys.
So all right, that's fantastic. Great news. So let's go ahead and invite Thomas here. He's our next speaker, and let me see if I can find him here out in the this. All right, so Thomas, if you're out there, I did invite you. All right, how are you doing, Thomas? So
I'm checking my mic. Got two microphones. I never know which one's working. Hold on.
Okay.
222. Yes, it's the better one. Excellent.
Great.
Right. Whatever shall we talk about?
Well, that's up to you. You don't need any introductions, but if you want to, go ahead.
There's always somebody new, man. You are growing this audience all the time. I think you should definitely do an introduction.
So Thomas Cox from EOS Alliance. He's a wealth of information and knowledge on these governance issues, resources everywhere. You can't catch up, but he'll kind of help you not only with the resources, just in guidance, just the process as well. Just amazing. Thank you for joining us, and really look forward to what you have to say. You can add to this, just maybe let us know what you've been up to. But
sure. Well, actually, what I think would be fun would be to share with the audience a little primer on blockchain governance that I put together for the International Society for the Study of Decentralized Governance. I'm presenting this in 2 days. So if people have feedback in the comments on what's confusing or what was especially good, don't change that, or that I'm talking about the wrong things or whatever, any feedback would all be very helpful. And I think that some of it could be really, maybe useful to folks, especially if they're a little bit newer to this whole blockchain governance thing, like I am.
Well, all right, a sneak peek. That's awesome. Like, we got an exclusive on a sneak peek here, but I'll let you go. I'm going to turn my camera and mic off. So if there's anything I need to,
sure. And I'll try to figure out how I share I never remember how to share my screen. Here we go. Share screen, application window.
Okay, we'll wait a little bit just to make sure you're set up. Okay, awesome.
So, uses and limitations of smart contracts for blockchain governance. And I was just reading, listening to a podcast earlier this morning with Gavin White, who rather famously was one of the co-founders of Ethereum and was CTO of Ethereum for a while, and works with the immortal Vitalik Buterin. And anytime they talk about governance, I want to pay attention because they've been struggling in this space for a lot longer than us EOS folks have. And he said that, Vitalik's totally wrong about da-da-da-da-da-da. And I realized that he and Vitalik are arguing two sides of the same issue, and I'm going to show you both sides right here. So, the Vlad Zamfirs and the Gavin Whites and the Vitaliks, they're all somewhat right, and they're kind of arguing past each other. And this is going to take us up a level out of the petty conflict and into a better understanding of the problem space, I hope. So first, we always have to start with this: what is governance? Because if you're not clear on what you're talking about, I promise you'll not get agreement with other people. So what is governance? Governance is a system of, number one, making collective decisions. And that word collective is very important. Making collective decisions and then carrying out those decisions in a way that's auditable and verifiable and accurate and complete and correct. And then also tweaking the decision-making rules by which collective decisions are in fact made. So let's change is it a supermajority vote for certain kinds of things? How many votes is required to close debate? How do we vote to amend the Constitution? Things like that. So for example, let's say you and 19 of your friends want to share 5 large pizzas with specific toppings and crust options. And so you might think we got agreement whenever all 20 people said, yeah, pizza, except you've only got a decision to have pizza. You don't actually have pizza. So now what? Well, now you have to do the second piece, which is put together the order. Okay, which specific pizzas are we getting? What toppings? Which crusts? Who do we place the order with? Who's going to go pick it up? Who's paying for this? Do we have plates and napkins? What about beverages? And so there's all this implementation work, even after the hard work of decision-making occurs. And then, do we want to amend the rules? Because maybe the group of 20 agreed by majority rule, and there's 11 really happy people and 9 kind of grumpy people for whom pizza was their second choice. But they lost the majority vote. And maybe in future, we don't want to do it that way. So all 3 of these things together make up governance. Now, often when you read about this or listen to people talk about governance, especially if they're outside of the blockchain space, and sometimes even inside, you'll hear this word governance used as a synonym for corporate governance or board duties or administration or reporting. And that's not false, but it's really not complete. They're drilling into that carrying out phase, the number 2 of the 3 points, often because it's what they care about or it's all that they've been given to do. But in fact, the word governance, for our purposes, has to include the larger superset of deciding and carrying out and tweaking of rules. So a couple of key concepts. We won't need all of them for this presentation, but you will need them if you want to be a student of governance. And one is principles and agents. And you will see this again and again and again. Often people come to blockchain and they think they're the first people to discover that when you delegate your power to somebody, they might not do what you want. And in fact, the principal agent problem has been around for thousands of years, and the literature on principles and agents has been around for hundreds of years. So there's a large body of learning and knowledge that we can draw from if we want to be, students of this challenge and, tap the wisdom of the ages to help us with our cutting edge problems. Another key concept is decision making, and specifically the difference between unilateral versus cooperative versus unanimous versus collective decisions. You will often hear people say, well, I don't want to be coerced and I want, maximum individual choice, and we should all be cooperating, and blah, blah, blah. And yes, that's true. And in fact, I would claim that you want to make the fewest collective decisions you can possibly get away with, because the difference between that first row there of unilateral, cooperative, and unanimous versus the second row of collective is that in the first row, if you act unilaterally, you're probably making yourself happy, because if you weren't making yourself happy, why would you do that? If it's cooperative, then you and another person both want to do it. And if it's unanimous, you and several people all want to do it. So there's no coercion, there's no minority, there's no, people getting their second choice, one imagines, versus collective, where by definition, you will almost always have a minority whose first choice isn't the one that's made. And so collective decisions are a big, big deal. Information asymmetry also plays into this. So does contract incompleteness. A guy named Simon Hart, I think it was, got the Nobel Prize in, I want to say 2015, for his contributions to contract theory. And he really focused on contract incompleteness. The short takeaway there is you cannot write a contract, a smart contract, or a paper one that can anticipate every single possible future occurrence and condition, which is why contracts are inherently incomplete and therefore must be capable of, at least in theory, of revision, or you will be locked into something you don't like, potentially. That's important. And then the whole idea of friction and the concept of a firm, and the fact that blockchains allow people to do things that aren't companies and aren't subcontractors, but are somewhere in between, with the low friction of a single company, but the high flexibility of contractors and arm's length relationships. Right. Principals versus agents. This is a nested game. I want to dwell on this a little bit. If you have shareholders or stakeholders and a board of directors, then the shareholders or stakeholders are the principals. They're the ones whose interests are most at stake, and they then hire or elect a board of directors to look after their interests. But then the board becomes a principal in its relationship with the CEO that the board selects and hires. And the CEO is the agent of the board and indirectly of the shareholders or stakeholders. And then, of course, the CEO turns around as principal and hires as his agents or her agents staff. And I want to make a shout out to the Carver model, because Carver actually makes this very formalized and differentiates between owners, the board, the staff, and beneficiaries, because you could easily imagine a set of owners creating an entity designed to benefit, say, kids with cancer. And I promise you, the kids with cancer are not the owners. They don't have millions of dollars. You got Bill Gates and other people up there, as owners, putting money in and hiring a board who hire staff to look after the interests of these beneficiaries they've picked out. And so while in a corporation, often these shareholders or stakeholders are the beneficiaries, along with customers, along with employees, that isn't always the case. And Carver does a great job of formalizing that and doing some very, very clear thinking. Other key concepts I want to talk about is this principal agent thing is an eternal struggle between self-interest and duty and information asymmetry. And that's illustrated beautifully in this Wikipedia diagram: principal on the left, agent on the right. And so the principal hires the agent performs duties for the principal, but the principal has self-interest where he might or she might withhold information from the agents. And the agent might have self-interest and not fully communicate information back up to the principal. And they've each got access to different information that the other one does not have. And so the way in which the principal oversees, the way in which the agent performs, may be suboptimal, simply because of these two forces of self-interest and information being asymmetric. For instance, one of the scams that pops up from time to time is an office manager who doesn't buy office supplies from Office Depot. They buy office supplies from Fred's Office Supply Inc. And it turns out that Fred is actually her cousin who buys from Office Depot and marks it up 10% and splits the markup with her. And so she's directing the payments from her own company, not for the benefit of the company, but partially for the company and partially for herself. And the company overpays and under-receives, and she's skimming. It's called fraud. So now we get into automating governance and the question of what can and can't be automated realistically. So I was wondering, what are the parts of governance that are most automatable? And this is a spectrum. But the things that seem most automatable to me are remember, there's the 3 points of deciding, carrying out, and tweaking. Mostly it's in the deciding and the carrying out. So in the deciding phase, qualifying an initiative for the ballot. Let's say we had a blockchain or a non-blockchain where we wanted to not let everybody put up an initiative anytime they wanted to. They have to, I don't know, put up 10 tokens or collect 1,000 signatures or whatever the qualification process is. Actually counting those signatures or counting those tokens, highly, highly automatable. So is actually casting votes, as we've seen the wonderful work from EOS Canada and their collaborators. And then tallying the votes, which is a separate piece of work and very, very tricky on blockchains, especially EOS, which has its interesting staking mechanisms. And also things like enforcing voting periods. The voting shall take place between, over a 30-day period or whatever that period is. To turn the voting off again at the right moment is highly automatable. In fact, probably the best way to do it. What about implementing? Let's say you've won the vote. Now you have to actually do the thing. Well, it is at least possible in some blockchains to implement a change where the referendum or the initiative included executable code that will automatically execute if and when the vote actually passes. That's what Ethereum folks refer to as on-chain governance usually. And in fact, in the Polkadot protocol, in the successor to Polkadot, I think it's called Substrate, they actually have it set up to make voting and agreeing on and rolling out upgrades more automated, not fully automated, but a lot of the implementation details are automated, and that's considered a virtue if you want to make it nice and clean and repeatable and testable. It's also very risky, of course. And then removing and adding a new voter to or from your collective if you have one person, one vote, let's say. And then, of course, in tweaking the rules, the constitutional initiative that actually changes the amendment process just goes through the above two stages. And again, those things are automatable. And now you're thinking, great, Thomas, what's not automatable? What's the least automatable? And these are also important aspects. Again, in the deciding phase, well, discussing and deciding. Let's say it's pre-constitution. You don't even have a blockchain yet. You haven't set up, I say constitution is a technical term for the document you create when you create a collective. That is the technical term from Tulloch and Buchanan, 1962, from the Calculus of Consent. Also deciding how to limit ballot access. Like I threw out a couple of ideas a minute ago, 10 tokens or 100 signatures. Well, who decides that it's 10 tokens and not 9 or 11? Why is it 100 signatures? Why not 1% of the voting population or, 1/2 of 1% of all tokens or something? Well, I don't know. You got to decide that. And then you have to, put that up in front of people and get them to agree. Also, the writing of initiatives for the ballot. I promise you that just because you can vote on something doesn't make the thing you voted on actually make sense. I live in Oregon, and Oregon has more ballot initiatives than I think any other state in the union, and one of the most of any you'll find in any country. And so we've seen a lot of initiatives come out that people even voted in favor of and got a majority, that when you read them, you're like, I don't understand what we're trying to do here. I don't know. We said yes, but what do we do? And if it's not clear what we do, or if it's not clear what a yes and a no mean, or if there's 3 votes, option A or option B or no change, and it's not clear what option A and option B mean, you're in deep trouble because you've promised to do the thing if it passes, and now it's passed, and you don't know what doing it looks like. And believe me, I promise you, I can write you a referendum that if it passed, you wouldn't know what to do. And if you can do it on purpose, you can also do it by accident. So getting that referendum written correctly is hard. And there's some technical pieces to it. And that's, by the way, why we have a ballot crafters group hard at work, in the community, working on guidance on, how you can write your idea so that if people vote yes for it and it wins, then people know how to implement that thing. Rather important. Otherwise, you wasted your time. What about campaigning for and against an initiative? Well, all that campaigning's off-chain, or at least it's not automated. Even though we all get robocalls at election time, still, the actual campaigning is decided on and executed by human beings, not smart contracts. And of course, if you have to revise your draft initiative from early feedback from your focus group, or you poll an idea and say, if the election were held today, which way would you vote on blah? And then you tweak the language, or you get feedback from ballot crafters that your language is incoherent, and even if you got a yes, nothing would happen. That's important. Now we shift over into the implementing phase, implementing change. What if the referendum didn't include auto-executable code? You're basically saying, when this passes, the block producers shall change inflation from 5% to 4%. Okay, great. And you pass that by enough to make that a valid constitutional change. Now the block producers have just been instructed by you, the token holders, to go make a change to code. But somebody has to do that. That's not automated. Also very important is log rolling and side payments. Log rolling is, look, I don't like this much, but I'll vote for your thing if you vote for mine. And that may or may not look good to folks at the ballot box as part of popular voting, but we expect it from legislators. And the idea of side payments, where if there's winners and losers in a vote, remember we are talking collective action, so there's almost always going to be losers, should the winners reimburse the losers for their loss? And that could make a ton of sense, because, if we have a change where it makes us $1,000 richer as a society, and at the same time it impoverishes one group by $10, why don't we just take out of that $1,000, $10, reimburse them so they're made whole, and then we still have 990 worth of pure profit to split, however we end up splitting it. And again, side payments aren't the same thing as bribes necessarily, although they could be. And side payments could just be reimbursements for losses. And log rolling is, again, this sort of ageless idea. Another thing that cannot be automated is deciding the criteria that justify removing a person from the collective. That has to be a human choice. We could then automate pieces of it, but deciding like how toxic does someone have to be before we kick them out? And if we are going to kick somebody out, how do we do that in a way that is just and fair so that the rest of us feel good about it, and that people who are joining realize that, hey, once you join, you might get kicked out later. And if we have you join, and then when we kick you out, we strip you of all your assets, maybe we just have a conveyor belt where we lure people in who have assets, then kick them out and strip them of their assets on their way out, and we're basically thieves. Well, probably not a good plan. So how do you, if someone has violated the social contract and they just need to be removed, or maybe they want to be removed voluntarily, they're leaving, still there's a process for that. And deciding what the rules are is not automatable. Okay, so governance challenges. Institution creation, going from nothing to something, is a massive lift. To create a constitution, to create a, in terrestrial government, a Supreme Court and a legislature and a body of legislation and a set of rules for the legislature to conduct its own internal business, and how do you hold elections and blah, blah, blah. And how do you divide people up into groups for proportional representation of the legislature? All of that. Once it's up and running, tweaking it hard enough, getting it started is really, really hard. Also hard in a different way is setting social norms of conduct, both all the informal or the tacit expectations that, hey, we just drive on the left, and maybe we don't have laws about driving yet, but you drive on the right or you drive on the left, depending on if you're in the UK or the rest of the civilized world. Another governance challenge for blockchains is the lack of oracles for outside data. What if you wanted to say, in fact, we did want to say this back in April and May, that we wanted block producer pay to vary by token price. And there was an idea that block producers could just bid, or that there might be an oracle, but there was no reliable way at that time, nor do I think there is yet, to get a feed of outside information like token price that would let you vary BP pay in a way that would be hard to game. And that can show up in lots of governance areas. Also, social convention enforcement mechanisms. So once you have norms of conduct, how do you enforce it? What's the on-chain equivalent of a frown or a dirty look or critical comments, where we go from, think of how Mothers Against Drunk Driving in the United States more or less single-handedly led the change, where it used to be, stand-up comics would make jokes about how drunk they were when they drove, and now that's completely unacceptable socially. We might call that an advance. I think it is, but it wasn't led through automation. And making that kind of change is a challenge. We also have the eternal challenge of voter apathy and rational ignorance. The principal agent problem gets mentioned yet again because it is an ongoing systemic problem. And what about mixed expectations and a lack of agreed purpose or direction? People buy the EOS token, and now they are stakeholders on mainnet, but they're longtime old school crypto maximalists, and they think that blockchains should only ever be about if you own your key, then you own the token. If you lose your key, you lose the token. That's just the way it's always been. It's okay, but does it have to be that way here? Didn't we have an expectation that we would have key recovery, which we don't, but we should. But if they had their way, we wouldn't even plan on that. And so, how do their expectations get squared with the expectations of those of us who think key recovery is a good idea? So again, getting to the other side of that. And I had some thoughts on social enforcement I want to share here in the remainder of my time. And this has to do with the problem, for instance, of block producers on EOS mainnet who have no effective means to punish defectors from a group's norms and expectations. And that's true of any group. Is if they're going to have norms and expectations, they need both rewards and punishments, whether they're mild or severe, for trying to maintain that, or they aren't a group. And the norms aren't really norms. And I'm aware of 4 major approaches for designing enforcement mechanisms that could translate into a blockchain context. And the one that I think most of us resist because it seems bureaucratic and maybe excessive is the permanent structure with agents hired by the structures. Think of the Internal Affairs Bureau of the Police or the Inspector General's office, or people whose permanent job it is to go around enforcing the rules that are maybe passed by other people. A second approach is permanent role with rotating person, like a Toastmasters club, where someone's the grammarian and somebody else is the timer, and is a different person every meeting, but the role is permanent. And maybe everyone takes a turn. Idea 3, you have a permanent role with an elected role holder, like the local dog catcher. And so there's somebody who, once a week, once a month, if it's the block producers, they could pick one of their number to temporarily have the permanent office of cop, or whatever term you want to call it. And then a fourth one that occurred to me is the permanent structure with random selection, like a jury. So that's a possibility. And so one of the ways I fleshed this out in some detail to see if folks want to try this out, maybe on a test net or in some voluntary subgroup of block producers might choose to do something like this. If we have the hypothesis that we could rely on, say, variations on the altruistic punishment mechanism, and have an expectation that block producers police themselves, maybe that would be enough to reduce overt collaboration on public mainnets, things like vote buying and violating reg producer and launching multiple VP candidates by one owner and destroying the idea of block producer independence. Altruistic punishment is this idea that, and it's stood up pretty well in the psychological literature, that if someone is, clearly violating social norms, there are at least some people in society who are willing to incur some small cost to themselves in order to visit a larger than their cost penalty to the person who did the thing they don't like. And the classic laboratory experiment is 2 people face each other and they know they're going to go for 10 rounds and they might alternate perhaps. And each round, one of them is given a stack of dollar bills to divide equally or unequally between the 2 of them. And then the second person can say, yes, I'll take that deal, or no, I won't. And if they say, yes, I take that deal, then they keep the money. And if they say, no, I don't take the deal, then the money goes away and they both get nothing. And so if it's a stack of 20, $1 bills, and I'm the one dividing it, I might give 19 to me and 1 to you. But you might think, well, it's rational to take $1 because it's more than nothing. But you might also think, what a greedy jerk. That's not okay. And so your social value might say that that's just too little of a share. And you might say, nope. Whereupon I've just lost $19 because I was too greedy. And over time, they've found that at least in, the United States and other Western and European countries among college students, about a 2-to-1 ratio is a good enough split that people will say yes reliably most of the time. So it would be, 14 for me and 6 for you, or 13 for me and 7 for you. And then you'll let me keep my 14 or my 13. And so that willingness to give up a little bit in order to hurt somebody else, that does seem to be a building block we might be able to build on. So what if and I'm building on other people's ideas here quite a bit. What if each block producer's daily pay was sequestered into some sort of personal lockbox of, their own for 7 days? And if any two other block producers got mad at that BP for any reason, they could file a grievance, and they would have to burn 1 token for every 100 of the other guy's tokens they wanted to lock up as part of the grievance. And then at the time they file their grievance, automatically a group of 7 other BPs that are neither the people who feel the grievance nor the one who would be defending are in that pool. 7 of the BPs are randomly selected and assigned as a jury, and they've got 7 days to agree whether to burn the 100 tokens or just let them go. And if they fail to reach a verdict, then they're automatically returned after 7 days. And because there's no rules around this, obviously the BPs would have to come up with their own social agreement. And this mechanism could be used maybe to enforce that social contract. I'm not saying this is good, and I'm not saying I know how to code it, but it's a thought, and hopefully it's limited enough and doesn't create new standing structures and new offices that this could scale and remain decentralized. I've got more to go into on other slides, but I think I've gone long enough because I think you had a 20-minute slot and I've gone 26. So how about I stop there and you tell me if that was interesting, if there's questions on that. And you're muted.
Any questions from the audience? I think Eve's made a brief
If you're not muted, I still can't hear you. Wait, I might be turned off. Hold on. Okay, try again. I didn't hear a thing.
Thomas, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Still nothing.
Okay, so
now I hear you. Okay, it just takes a minute for the headset to wake up.
Okay, great. So yeah, fantastic presentation. I know Eve made a comment on the side about the EOS Bureau of Investigation, EBI, and then he made a comment, isn't that what we technically have right now is a system self-policing? So maybe
a self-policing system implies some way of sanctioning people, and there's no mechanism that I'm aware of to actually carry out sanctions other than arbitration awards, which people have been reluctant to file and seems to be pretty slow moving. And what I was hoping to throw out as a not terribly fully baked idea, but at least as a possibility, is a way block producers could, amongst themselves, come up with something that was fast, fair, and final. We're not raking back tokens from somebody's account on a block producer's order. The tokens are in a at-risk location, and the code says it could get tipped over into a grievance contract within the first 7 days after you earn the money. And having that prearranged means no arbitrator necessary. No one outside the block producers even have to pay attention to it. And it would give the block producers a way to, do something other than yell at, say, Start EOS or Bitfinex or somebody if they felt that person or that group was violating the standards by which block producers wish to be held. And if there's already an existing method of sanction, I'm not aware of it. And I promise you, once that mechanism is in place, if there's not a social agreement on, when is it okay to do grievances and when is it not okay, an agreement would quickly be reached. Norms would arise. They always do. One hopes.
So there's one more question in the Ask a Question section. If I can go ahead and read it, or you can.
Yes, absolutely true. Rhett from EOS Amsterdam says that the 15 of 21 rule that we have right now for DPoS consensus does mean that 7 block producers can block progress. They can block finality at most. They can't actually prevent block production. They can block finality because maybe no block gets more than 14 signatures because 7 people are on strike somehow. And that will last until token holders say, what's going on with my chain? And who is holding things up? Hopefully, again, we've all been hoping since the beginning of our design here on EOS that activist shareholders would be the bulwark of protection for the chain. And we haven't seen as much activist voting as I, for one, was hoping for. So yeah, certainly if 7 colluded to prevent the advancement of LIB, that would be a problem. What you would see then, though, is that LIB would halt because the code is currently set up, I think, we saw this back in July, that if there is a bug or for any other reason, the last irreversible block doesn't advance past a certain point, blocks stop getting made and the whole chain stops. And at that point, I think people are going to say, yeah, we're not happy. And again, I say hoping, yes, we don't have a robust, 1,000-year history of strong written and unwritten expectations on how people behave. This is brand new space. I'd be lying if I said otherwise.
All right, Thomas, really appreciate it. Very interesting wealth of knowledge as always. And yeah, I'm sure if anybody wants to also give any feedback after, just where can they reach you, Thomas? And
yeah, Telegram at Thomas B. Cox. I'll stick that in chat. And absolutely would love to get feedback, positive, negative, or neutral on the whole slide set, including the whole block producer idea. It's not something I'm putting up for a referendum. I don't think it's ready for that sort of thing yet. I think block producers should decide for themselves what they want to do. I have a sort of a fantasy that 20 or 30 block producers will go, we're the clean group, we're the clean 15, and we're going to do this voluntarily amongst ourselves and have our own lockbox and put ourselves at risk with each other. And and that's not that's not collusion. That's collaboration. That's creative. So we'll see.
All right, sounds good. All right,
Thomas B. Cox on Telegram. Would love to hear from folks. And big thanks to you, Jun, and also to your audience for caring so much about governance. This is, I believe it's true what many people have said. Frank Merkel has said this. Vlad Zamfir has said this. Many folks have said that governance is the biggest challenge in blockchain today. And I don't know that EOS has the right answers in every case, but we're certainly asking the right questions. And I think we have the most engaged group. And it's the folks in this audience and your other presenters who are going to make the future of blockchain for the whole globe, for all of humanity. This is the cutting edge. This is where the new stuff is happening.
Wow,
I'm proud to be part of it.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Thomas. Just always great wealth of knowledge, and we're learning every day, and it's exciting. And thanks for sharing all your knowledge here. So
anyway, take care. Bye.
All right, take care, Thomas. All right, that was great. So we have Josh. If he's out in the audience, he's next, and I'm going to invite him. But yeah, this is great. I love everything about governance, and it's just amazing what you learn every day. So, Josh,
Adrian.
All right, we can hear you. Can everybody else? I heard you. So volume's maybe a little bit.
Let me turn it down.
Slightly low.
So slightly low or slightly high?
A little bit low. Oh, Brett says it's perfect, so I'm not going to say anything. So, all right, awesome. So Thomas from, or what am I saying, Thomas? Josh from EOS Canada, who's been hard at work at the referendum, just as Daniel was earlier, and excited to hear what you have to say, maybe as a compliment to what Daniel started out with as well. So, you can feel free to introduce yourself, maybe tell us a little bit of what's going on with EOS Canada, and then you could go to the presentation. So,
sorry about that. Let me just pause this actually before it goes recursive. Okay. So I'm Josh from EOS Canada. I tend to deal with community-related things and governance-related things for the team here. Strong tech team, but governance is such a critical aspect of EOS that we have to make sure not to leave that by the wayside, which is why we've tried to really push things on the referendum front, working on the work proposal system, things like that. So we built the actual smart contract that runs the referendum, which is eosio.forum. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll get right into the little presentation. My idea was just to add on to what Daniel had already discussed. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So the referendum contract, and also I'm going to tie in something that we've spearheaded as well at EOS Canada, EEPs, or the EOS Enhancement proposals. So the referendum contract, what does it do? That's a question that a lot of people have some issues with. Basically, it's a bare bones contract that allows a user to post a proposal to the chain, and then other users can then respond to that proposal. That's, when you break it down to its simplest form, that's what it does. It stores the data in RAM for all the votes and the proposals. So it's easily accessible, it's quick to compute. And then when a vote or proposal has expired, 72 hours after that, someone can clean the proposal from RAM. So basically, the vote itself always lives on chain for years and years to come, but it comes out of RAM as well. The amount of RAM per vote is roughly 430 bytes, so it's not expensive. But if someone were to go and vote on 40 or 50 proposals, we have no idea how many are going to come to. They would probably have to purchase a bit more RAM. But again, we don't expect users to be voting on 40 or 50 proposals. But it's just something to keep in mind. What it doesn't do, it does not tally the results. The vote tallying is done by another tool, which Daniel talked about, and I'll talk about it a bit later as well. There's no gatekeeper. So this was something we struggled with. How do we make sure that there's not a ton of spam? How do we make sure that there's not an influx of just 30 different votes all about Rex or all about a different idea? How do we make sure that people are voting on the right thing? We felt as a group that it was not up to us to impose a gatekeeper. We hope to see good ideas come forward by the community that we can vote on as a community. Things like maybe a fee for proposing for certain types. Maybe it'll be certain accounts will be in charge of it. So maybe BPs who control the EOSIO account, EOSIO.prods account, will be able to make proposals on behalf of EOSIO. And then this way, all the UIs can filter based on that. Let's look at all of these proposals first and present those to the community. So this way you don't have to scroll to find what the community or the community of BPs deems as being important or very, it like really needs the attention of all the community. It also does not execute a referendum vote automatically. So if a referendum is passed, the block producers still need to sign in MSIG 15 of 21 to put that result on chain and enact it. The reason we did this is that if we don't have a 15 of 21, then there's possibilities for someone to do something very malicious that we can't stop. If it's just executed because they have enough tokens and we don't have enough tokens to oppose that referendum, then there's no means to stop it. However, block producers are not looking to act as gatekeepers whatsoever. It's just that's how the system of EOS is designed. There could be ways to automate this in the future if we see that it's either needed or if it's something that would actually work, that we can see that there's been good results and there's not enough to worry about. But as far as we're concerned, we need this this last little check and balance. There's always the talk of 2/3 of the houses. You got BPs, you have arbitration, you have community. You always need 2/3 to do something together. So this way, no single house can do something unanimously. So if we didn't have this block producers and community, then the community can just enact something without the technical expertise of the chain, the block producers enacting it properly. There could be something wrong with the code that they want to enact. There's a whole bunch of issues that could pop up. So the vote tally for the results. So as I said before, the votes are all put on chain and they're stored in RAM as long as the proposal is live. But then as soon as the vote gets started, we start to tally those results because we want to see in real time what's going on. So if you didn't catch Daniel Keys's presentation just earlier, I definitely recommend you go through the crowdcast. You'll be able to see it there. So Denis Carrière of EOS Nation, he built the main vote tally tool. There's another one currently being built by EOS Mediterranean. There are just a few things that they have to tweak to get it to make sure that everything's running smoothly, giving the same results. And we hope to see a lot more implementations. This way we have cross verification. So when Denis was building the tool, he tried a few different tools to gather the data in time and compute the data. He ended up using Diffuse, which is another tool that us at EOS Canada built. And then finally, after a few months of work, that gave him the stability he needed to actually run the vote tally. So I've put forward within the EEP, the EOS Enhancement proposal, four types of proposals to use on the ESIO.forum contract. You can use whatever you want. Anyone could create any kind of proposal. You can call it type hula hoop if you want. However, I'm trying to make standards. This way the block producers know and the users know what they're voting on and what kind of effect it could have. So the four kinds are a referendum, a poll, an options, or a multi-select, and I'll dive into each of those now. So referendum, that's probably the most important one for everyone to know. It's just limited to a yes, no question, because right now in the Article 11 of the Constitution, that's how it's being referred to, with yes and no. So we didn't want to overcomplicate this by adding other, instead of yes and no, maybe it's true or false or whatever it may be. However, in going forward, there could be other language added to the Constitution if needed. In my opinion, the referendum should be the only thing that block producers look to for actionable results. If block producers have to keep track of every different kind of proposal, we don't know how many there are. Maybe they're going to miss something important, or maybe they're going to think that something should be actionable when it wasn't because it was a joke or a farce, who knows. Or maybe they're going to think something shouldn't be actionable, but it really was. It was intended to be very serious. This way, if we can standardize things and make them all very clear so that everyone understands, as well as across languages, that to me is very important. The results have to meet Article 11, as I mentioned, of the Constitution. So an example of this would be, should we change the name of the EOS token to SYS? Someone can vote yes or no. The next one would be a poll. So to me, poll is probably going to be the one that's used the most. It's used to ask a yes, no, or an abstain. An abstention, just in case anyone doesn't know, means I am choosing not to vote in this, but I'm casting my participation. So an example of this would be 1,000 votes go to yes, 900 votes go to no, and 100 votes go to abstain, because there's 2,000 people in this community. Abstain basically is a way of someone saying, I'm willing to allow the will of the community go forward, but I want to show that I think this thing is important. So let's say a poll put in place a requirement that they need to have 1,000 tokens staked towards this poll. I can, if I have 100 tokens and I see it needs, more tokens staked to actually get over that line, I could stake towards it, even though I don't care if it's a yes or a no outcome. So this poll could be used for anything. It helps to direct referendum proposals by, testing the waters. Maybe we want to do a referendum, like an actual referendum that is actionable, but we don't know if the outcome is going to be yes or no. Someone can do a poll just to see what the immediate feedback is. We might see that there's an overwhelming yes, an overwhelming no. And we can see, hey, maybe we have to craft the language of this referendum better first. Or, it's a good way to get feedback first. Each proposal within poll can also self-define its own results and rules that it's looking for. So maybe it needs, 1 million tokens participating, and it needs 60% yes or above, or something like that. An example of this, we used it within EOS Canada. We wanted to buy a piece of art for the wall because we have a little employee pot that we have for doing little nice things for the office. So we put the question on chain: do we want to buy this piece of art? Everyone came in and voted. We were able to tally up the results, and then we made a decision based on that. So an example of this could be, should we change the name of the EOS token to SYS, which is the same question that I gave as an example for referendum, but this is not actionable or shouldn't be seen as actionable by the block producers. This is a way of saying, hey, right away people say, hey, no, SYS, I don't like that token symbol. Let's choose something else, and we can test the waters on something else. So options. So the way that you can offer up to 256 different options possible. So actually, I'll include the example right away in this. Should we change the name of the EOS token symbol to SYS, EEE, SOE, which is just EOS backwards, B1 for block 1, and you can go on and on and on for up to 256 different options. In my mind, abstain should always be an option that's included. So I would see this as 255 options plus abstain. It can be used for anything. Should I name my baby XYZ? whatever. UIs can also create vote buttons using the proposal itself. So within the JSON file that gets submitted as a proposal, the person who's the proposer who's proposing it, the first index, which is 0, could be cis. The second index, which is 1, could be EEE, and so on and so on. And then the UIs would display the buttons as 0 cis, 1 EEE, 2 SOE, 3 B1. So this way, a user could click on, let's say, 3 for B1. Then when their vote gets pushed to the chain, it's not going to say 3 B1. It's just going to say 3. The reason we do this is to save on RAM, because we don't want to make it expensive for users to vote on the referendum or use this as a polling tool. So they'll just see 3, and then they'll be able to see, okay, 3 is the correlation to B1. That's the correct vote. So you want to make sure that whatever happens, users have a way to cross-verify that the vote they cast is the vote they got pushed to chain. If they voted yes, a yes will always be 1. If they voted no, a no vote will always be 0. So these kind of things are standardized and should be simple for a user to cross-verify. The next option here is multi-select. So think of this as a list that you can choose a few options of. All the other previous proposal types I mentioned, or you choose yes or no. You choose yes, no, or abstain. You can't choose yes and abstain, or you can't choose this token symbol EOS and B1, because I like them both. But multi-select actually allows you to do that. So you can offer up to 8 different options for response, and that's because there's 8 bits to a byte. And I'll give an example of this in a second. Multi-select can be used for anything. And UIs, the same as with the options, can create vote buttons using the proposal itself to link each button to the correct vote. Each proposal can self-define rules, as I mentioned before. They want to see X amount of tokens participating, sustained for X period of days. It should be within the vote itself. So if we were to look at the same thing, should we change the name of the EOS token to SYS or EEE or SOE or so on? The results of that would be encoded into the binary of the vote value that is pushed to the chain. And I'll really clear this up in a second. This is done to save RAM, as I mentioned. And again, just to reiterate, RAM consumes about 430 bytes. Actually, for people who have been asking, the amount of RAM needed to create a proposal depends on the size of the proposal itself. I think last I checked, it was around 380 bytes for a bare bones single letter proposal. And then it just goes up from there. You're allowed up to 10,000 bytes. So if you have a really long piece of text, it's about 1 character per byte, unless you're in other languages, like I think most Chinese characters take 2 bytes. So if you have a long string of text, it might take 5K to do the proposal. Or if you have a really short text, it might only take 1K or even less than that to make the proposal. So let's say in a multi-select scenario, a user wants to select the options 0, 2, 3, and 6. And again, the way it works is that 0 is always the first level. So it's 0 through 7 and not 1 through 8. And then we consider all selections to be 1, and anything that's unselected remains a 0. So there's 8 bits in a byte. It's made up of zeros and ones. And we go from left to right, called big endian. So it's reverse. Oh, sorry. I want to fix this. It's right to left. I'm going to have to fix that in there. I apologize. It goes from right to left. So if the user selected 0, 2, 3, and 6, you'll see in green that he selected 0, 2, 3, and 6. And then those all become 1s instead of 0s. Now, this is a binary value. And now we want to convert that into decimal. So you can go to Google and say binary to decimal conversion. It'll ask for this value. So you go 01001101, and that equals 77. So then the vote value that gets pushed to the chain is 77. So that's what a user would see when they go to a block explorer, and they would see 77 as their vote value. They can go back to any block explorer. They go back to Google and do a decimal to binary conversion. What is 77 in binary? And they'll see that and they'll be able to say, yes, I voted 0, 2, 3, and 6. So EOS and enhancement proposals, and how did this tie in? When we were making the referendum, we noticed that a lot of people had a lot of questions. What is the standard for this? What is the standard for this? And it just didn't exist. So we decided to build out the EEP repo to make sure that people could start working together as groups to collaborate on making new standards. So this dates back to RFCs, which is a request for comments, which a lot of standards on the internet have been built upon for decades already. In Bitcoin, there's BIPs, which is the Bitcoin Improvement Proposals, and there's EIPs in Ethereum Improvement Proposals. And currently the repo for the EEPs exists on EOS Canada's GitHub repo, just because we've been looking to push it over to a community GitHub that is owned by the community. There's not enough traction at the moment, so that's part of this. I'm hoping more people get interested, start making their own proposals. There's been one EEP in draft that was proposed by Rob Rigo from EOS Detroit. So it's just within the issues of our EOS Canada repo. So we're hoping to see more proposals by community members. So this way we can work as an EOS community to make these standards we need. You can also go to eeps.io to view it. It's a nice way to view the GitHub page. So I've got a bunch of links here that I'll leave on the screen, and I'll also pop them into the chat that basically deal with all the things I've been talking about here. And that's the end of the slide. So I'm going to come back to the session. Stop sharing my screen. So I'm going to pop those links into the chat for everyone. And open for questions if anyone has anything.
Any questions from anybody out there in the audience? Great presentation, by the way, Josh.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thanks for putting this together. I really appreciate it. It's awesome.
Yeah, this is fun. So it doesn't seem like anyone's asking any questions right now. So any final call for questions? Just a big thank you to you, Josh.
Thank you. I'll pop my my Telegram handle into the chat as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me, feel free. You can join us in the EOS Canada channel, or join us in the Referendum Working Group. Just on Telegram, search EOS Referendum Working Group. Join us there. There's a whole bunch of us there that have been talking about referendum. Feel free to ask questions.
That sounds great. Yeah, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. I'm sure people will reach out to you. A lot of links and resources for the audience to kind of look at. And so, yeah, really appreciate it. So I'll see you out there in the Telegram channels. And for the audience out there, I'm going to just end the broadcast. We'll jump into the next session and we'll see you there. So you can sit tight and we'll bring you in. All right. Take care, guys.